You're right, guys. Shay here. Uneven Balance. Hope you guys are well. So delighted to be joined for part two of our segments, Why Transformation is Necessary, with Lawson Naidoo. Lawson, how you doing?
Good, thank you. Good to be back.
Indeed, yeah. It's been almost 2 weeks since we last spoke, and a hell of a lot has happened, as we know, in the past 8 days. So yeah, we'll obviously touch upon the transformation issues during the conversation, but we must obviously today focus on what's been happening over the last week or so. It all began with a statement, Lawson, from Lungi Ngidi, throwing support behind the BLM movement, and want to discuss it with his fellow teammates once they were regrouped. Everything really kicks off from there, Lawson. I see you and I have been in conversation quite a lot recently. I'll just let you just take it away, basically, Lawson, your thoughts.
Well, I think the first thing to note and to emphasize really is the context in which Lungi Ngidi made that comment. He was doing an online media conference. He was asked a question by a journalist about whether the issue had come up in discussions between with his teammates in the Proteas setup. He'd mentioned the fact that there had been some discussion, but it was difficult to engage on the issue given that all of this was being done online. But he certainly hoped that once they got together as a group, that it is an issue that they need to engage with, and if it doesn't come up, that it was something that he was prepared to table as an issue that the Proteas and Cricket South Africa as an organisation need to engage with, and that's really what kicked off this this controversy that has now raged for over a week. It's not just here in South Africa. We saw what happened on the morning of the test match in Southampton last week with the rain delay, Michael Holding and Ebony Redford Brent talking about what happened, their experiences as black people playing the game of cricket in England and the West Indies and traveling around the world. And I think that sort of lent a lot of, there was a lot of sympathy with those comments here. It's a message that landed very strongly amongst people in South Africa. And then you had the response to what Lungi Ngidi had said that had come from some former South African cricketers, particularly Pat Simcox, Puta Dipena, Brian McMillan and the like, who criticized Ngidi for standing up and really saying what he and many other black cricketers are feeling about not just cricket, but about society in South Africa and how it undervalues black life. And I think this is a very strong issue that arises here, as I say, not just in the context of cricket, but in terms of the inequalities that are still pervasive in South Africa 26 years into democracy, where black lives don't seem to matter as much as white lives do. And it's something that needs to be put very firmly on the agenda. And I think it's about, and I think in the responses that we've seen, a number of players have come out and spoken individually about their experiences. Ashwell Prince has been very vocal on the issue. Etienne Mbalati has spoken out about it, and numerous other players. Hussein Manak, as someone who played at the high level of the game in the pre-democratic era, spoke about his experiences and what players of his generation had to endure, what happened in the transition in 1991 and the like. So these are issues that have been burning within cricket in South Africa for 25, 30 years now, and have not been systematically addressed. They kept being swept under the carpet. There's no fundamental systemic change, and this focus on transformation and numbers and quotas actually misses the point about what transformation is ultimately about. It's about changing the way in which cricket in South Africa is governed, in which the institutional culture from club level through to international level needs to change in order to accommodate players of color as equals within cricket in this country. And that's something that is not happening. I think the conversations that are beginning to take place now, some of the hard conversations that are happening, and people breaking down in tears and talking about their experiences is important. It's a cathartic process that white cricketers, white cricket administrators, white sports fans in general need to hear to understand the pain that people have gone through and have oftentimes just hidden it and put on a brave face and gotten on with it simply to carry on playing the game. But I think a valve has now been released. The pressure is out. People are beginning to talk. And what we really need to see now is what response there is going to be from Cricket South Africa as the governing body of the sport in this country.
Okay, thank you, Lawson. I mean, just many points there that kind of I wanted to touch upon. But I mean, you touched upon the fact that there was ex-professional cricketers such as McMillan, Simcox, and Dippenaar who came out with quite scathing statements as a rebuttal to what Lungi Ngidi said last Monday. Was you surprised from the reaction from the cricketing, especially the ex-cricketers who have gone through the system, and do you feel that this kind of just simply reinforces the viewpoints of a lot of people cricketing public as well? I mean, they obviously have a greater standing in the game. So was it quite irresponsible of them to speak out in that manner, or did you feel like was you not surprised really from what they said?
Well, I wasn't at all surprised. Certainly not from Pat Simcox and Butter Dippenaar. I was perhaps surprised by some of the other cricketers that came out and made comments, negative comments about what Lungi Ngidi had said. And I think they underestimate the bravery that it takes for a young black cricketer who's just making his way in the game internationally to stand up and make a comment like that. It was hard enough for someone like Michael Holding, who's 66 years old, has done everything in the game, he's done everything in the game. And here's a young man standing up and taking a brave stand like that. And people need to give credit to him, whether they agree with him or not, acknowledge the bravery that it took for him to say what he did. And I think, what really irks is some of those players, the Simcoxes and the Dippenaars, who benefited from apartheid South Africa, who benefited from cricket being an exclusively white sport in this country, and not seeing the irony of a black cricketer standing up and saying they want to be treated equally. So it didn't surprise me. I don't think, and I would like not to believe, that it's a pervasive attitude amongst white cricketers and white cricket fans. But the shocking reality is that very few have stood up in terms of cricketers to support Lungi Ngidi. In fact, the only one that I'm aware of who stood up and said he supports Lungi Ngidi is former South African cricketer Vince van der Bijl, who, as you fans in England will know, had a miraculous season for Middlesex in 1980. Yeah. But he's the only white South African cricketer who stood up and backed Lungi Ngidi, and I think that is shameful for the rest of the white cricketing fraternity in this country.
But is that? And I think that's a huge point to state, really, the fact that no other former white South African cricketer has come out in support of Ngidi. But isn't that systemic of the viewpoints of these people, how they played the game, the bubble that they played in? I mean, why wouldn't they come out? Why haven't more people come out in support? I appreciate people who are currently playing, maybe even tail into their careers, like Dale Steyn, for example. I am sure sides of Lungi Ngidi. I'm sure he agrees with what he's come out and said, but obviously he's still playing at the moment. Why haven't more white South African cricketers come out and support, do you think?
That's a very good question. I mean, it's a question I think we're all asking ourselves. I know that the statement that was released today by 31 cricketers, former cricketers, and 5 coaches with a very strong statement, and it was all black cricketers and coaches. And the question has been raised as to why there were no white names on that list. But there's nothing to stop white cricketers from endorsing that statement and standing up in their own right and saying they stand by what Lungi Ngidi has said, or and to show some support for the stance. And that's on the other hand, it's also we see that in the relative silence from Cricket South Africa, apart from one statement media statement that they issued on Thursday evening last week. There's been silence from that camp as well. So we're a few days away from this 3TC tournament that's supposed to be happening on Saturday. With Nelson Mandela's birthday. We had a statement from Graham Smith last week saying that they would not be able to have the Black Lives Matter logo on the shirts for the games this weekend because they'd already gone to print. And that received a shocking response from people who said, Well, if there was a will to do that, they could be easily retrofitted to be ironed on, sewn on, whatever. But it shows a real lack of empathy with what this moment is actually all about. So it's going to be interesting to see what response there is on Saturday, how the Black Lives Matter issue is going to be addressed. That the CSA did say in their statement that they support the call for Black Lives Matter. They diluted it somewhat by saying that we must also be cognizant of all of the violence within our society, including gender-based violence and the like. And none of us would disagree with that. But the issue is, here's a moment to focus on racism within cricket, institutional racism that has prevented true transformation from taking place. And it's a moment for South African cricket to conduct a level of introspection and to say, we need to listen to what these players are saying. They may not all be right, but we need to engage in a process of hearing that criticism, internalizing it, and together saying, how do we fix this? As Ashwell Prince has said, cricket in South Africa at the moment is broken, and we need to fix it. And I think it's quite clear that this is a crossroads for South African cricket right now, that some very tough decisions are going to have to be taken, because I'm certainly hoping that the players that have spoken out will not stop speaking until proper action is taken.
I mean, I would quickly say that I felt that the excuse of the shirt's already gone to print is an absolute unmitigating PR disaster. I'm not sure who prompted him. Obviously, you should consult someone before making that ridiculous statement. Touch upon Graham Smith. So I've got some questions actually come through, some very good questions from Ravi. So we'll go to them in a second there, Ravi. But just touch upon Graham Smith. Do you feel that his position is now, dare I say, under threat from what's happened over the past 8 days, and how he's handled the situation? Do you feel like maybe with the pressure remaining, as you said before, people continue to speak, do you feel that there will be fundamental change at the top of CSA?
Well, look, I don't think it's about Graham Smith's position or necessarily any other individual's position. I don't think we should begin to look at it in that way, because again, it doesn't deal with the fundamental problem, which is a structural organizational problem. It may manifest itself in the way that Graham Smith responded to this issue last week. It was a very naive way of responding, and I think it plays into the perception that when issues of race are raised within cricket in South Africa, they're not taken seriously. They've just brushed aside on the assumption that it'll die down in a few days, it'll get swept under the carpet, and we can move on and have our 3TC tournament this weekend, and we will have forgotten about it by that time. I think the miscalculation here was that this issue is not going to go away. Players, supporters are not going to let this moment pass, because it is a critical moment. We haven't had a moment like this in South African cricket, where so many players have stood up and expressed their dissatisfaction with how the system has treated them.
And the system seems to be failing on a lot of counts. I think one thing that's come up out of the woodwork is that Mob Voucher wasn't, the position wasn't advertised, I believe, and he doesn't have the correct credentials. And he also was given a 4-year term, when in 2010, when Mickey Arthur departed, CSA's policy was no more than a 2-year term. Correct me if I'm wrong, no more than a 2-year term. But Mob Voucher was given a 4-year term. And it seems as a job for the boys. We touched upon last time in part 1 of this segment, Lawson, with the fact that Paul Harris, Jack Callis, Mob Voucher, obviously there, Graham Smith, are all there in obviously key positions. And the reason why I mention this now, I'm going to refer to one of the questions that Ravi's mentioned. Ravi's firing questions as we speak, and what are all great questions. But he said here, was Enoch Nkwe's demotion valid and poorly handled?
Well, it was certainly poorly handled. Enoch Nkwe is a highly qualified coach. He was a stand-in coach for a very short time. Went on a very difficult tour to India last year, where we were drubbed. But it's happened before, not just to South Africa. Many teams have gone to India and come back with their tails between their legs. So to judge him on that one series away from home, I think was particularly harsh. The fact that he's been retained within the setup as the assistant coach is obviously a plus. But it doesn't explain why he wasn't given a longer shot at the job, certainly for the England series here at home and the one days that followed that. And, Cricket South Africa could have given themselves a bit more time to think through this process of how they're going to go about appointing a coach. And as you highlight, Mark Boucher was appointed without going through any interview process, was given a very long 4-year contract by Graham Smith. We're not sure to what extent the Board of Cricket South Africa were involved in these discussions or decisions that were taken, and so on. So, it really it leaves a bad taste in the mouth, because it again comes to, it's not about the individual so much as about the processes, the institutional culture, the lack of a proper due process being followed in the job being advertised, shortlists being compiled, and candidates being interviewed, and in a competitive process.
I think that's what irks a lot of people. I think maybe that with South Africa seemingly in quite a low point after the India tour, Mark Boucher is obviously a household name in the country, and that would give obviously some, on the surface, perceived credibility to the position, and it may feel like, oh, the Pro team in good hands. We also have to acknowledge the fact that Boucher did very well at the Titans, so it's not like he's been plucked out of midair. He was in a coach position. He did very well at the Titans, albeit Titans are one of the biggest franchises with a very good squad, but he still obviously won many trophies in his tenure there. But I can see why people are frustrated with the fact that Nkwe was kind of on a high to nothing, because if you remember correctly, in 16-17, South Africa also got battered in India. If I remember, that was their first loss overseas in 9 years. And most teams do unfortunately get dropped, as you said, in India. It maybe should have been given that England series to kind of prove himself as an international coach. Again, I'm just going to go to the question that Robbie's has written here. He's mentioned about the recent marks of Simcox and Dippenaar. Do you believe that this will be the catalyst to produce a highly diverse and transformed team?
Well, before I come to Ravi's question, I want to get back to the point about Mark Boucher. I mean, Boucher was, very successful at the Titans, won lots of trophies. But there've been lots of complaints that have been aired in recent days about the treatment of black players under his tenure as the head coach of the Titans. So that's something that needs to be taken into account when you're appointing people at these high levels in positions within South African cricket. It's something that was totally glossed over. Etienne Balati has spoken about the treatment that he was meted out at the Titans, ultimately leaving the franchise. Other players have expressed similar comments and the like. So I think this really begins to open up the issue of what criteria are people being appointed to these senior positions within South African cricket.
You said before, Lawson, about the transformation needs to be the governance structure as opposed to simply on the field of play. What exactly, do you mind just elaborating that, please? What, for UK people who are watching this, what exactly do you mean by that? Does it need to be simply a case of people of Black African origin being appointed to these positions, or is it more of a mentality that needs to be?
No, it's about how the game is governed and run. It's not, of course, the color of the people that are there is important, particularly in the context of South Africa and the racially divided past that we come from, and the imperative of having black people in senior leadership positions. And there are many people who are eminently qualified to do these jobs, and it's about getting the right people in the right place to do the right thing. And the way the game is being run is not in that ilk. We've again run into a governance crisis within Cricket South Africa, with the chief executive having been suspended in December last year. There's no sign of an outcome of any disciplinary process. Reports are suggesting that the board has botched the disciplinary inquiry, whether deliberately or not is open to speculation. But it shows the lack of fundamental governance processes within the Board of Cricket South Africa. And those are the things that need to change so that the game is in fact being run properly, and that it'll gain a lot more confidence from players, from supporters, and ultimately from the sponsors as well, because we've seen the cash
The
crisis
major
that South
spots.
Africa,
Yeah.
Standard Bank have pulled out basically on the basis of poor corporate governance at Cricket South Africa. And these are issues that are not being addressed fundamentally, and they need to.
What were the first steps you would take, Lawson, towards creating a better governance structure for you?
Well, I think the what this moment now calls for is for Cricket South Africa to sit down and to say to the players, the ex-players, all of those that have spoken out, that are involved in the game of cricket in one way or another, to do what we in South Africa call, to have a Lekgotla or a Bosparat, is to get everyone in one room. Obviously, it's difficult at this point in time with the pandemic afflicting us, but for conversations of that nature to start, honest, open, painful conversations to take place, and for those that are currently running Cricket South Africa to go in there and accept the criticism that is going to come their way, not to be defensive about it, but to take that criticism on the chin and say that together, what do we need to do to fix the way we run the sport in South Africa that can make it more inclusive, can make the team a better team, make the game more competitive in this country, attract more players, attract sponsors, attract fans to the game. Those are the conversations that we need to be having, and everyone needs to feel safe to be able to do that. I think what's come out recently is that players are speaking out now. They were afraid to speak out earlier because of feeling that they would be victimized, that they may lose their playing or coaching contracts, and that culture of fear is something that is being exposed at the moment.
Yeah, it seems to be, in my opinion, was a glorious opportunity missed with the BLM movement. Obviously, as you said in the last segment, Lawson, that was a comment from the sports minister complaining about the lack of collar, quote unquote, in the in CSA, and obviously Lawson Naidoo comes out. He's not given the, I think, the wavering support he should have received, and it seems to be almost like a very stubborn resistance to the serious change that needs to happen. And I say maybe that's these hard-nosed conversations are exactly things that people don't want, Lawson. They don't want to have these conversations. They want to, keep their head buried in the sand and give the jobs to the boys and everyone just to be nice and happy as it used to be. Because I think one thing you've always told me, Lawson, is that, over the years, is that transformation is always looked at something that's a negative. It's never embraced as a positive. I think you wrote a piece, I believe, in one of the newspapers last year, citing this, that I think Temba Bavuma actually touched upon this as well. Like, shouldn't transformation be credited when a black player as well? It's never that way, is it? It's never, thank goodness for transformation when a black player performs, like Rabada, for example, etc.
Yeah, it's the insidious racism that exists there, that black players are not as good as white players, and you have the exceptions. You have the Kagiso Rabadas, you have the Hashim Amlas, the Vernon Philanders, who are world beaters, but they're seen as aberrations. They're not seen as, well, black people can play this game, and they've been playing it for hundreds of years in South Africa. Yeah. That's something that's missing from the psyche here, and that's something that we need to change. So there needs to be an acceptance that there are talented black cricketers in South Africa who will make the grade at domestic and international level if they are given a proper chance to do so. The players that have done so, many of them have done so, against the odds. Some of them, like Hashim and KG, went to very good schools. Lungi also went to a very good school and had the opportunities. But that shows that when players are given the opportunity, they're able to grasp it. How many more have not made it, despite the talent that they had, because they weren't given a fair crack at the work?
And I guess that's why they obviously increased the quota system years ago as a short-term measure. You've always said it's not a long-term solution. It's simply a case to push, obviously, inclusivity. That's why obviously these quotas have been introduced. But do you feel certain coaches over the years have looked at these quotas as a hindrance rather than a positive, and simply just play any kind of, we need to get 3 black Africans guys into the 11, doesn't matter where they go, they can bowl a couple of overs, just okay, we satisfied the criteria, guys,
Well, the fundamental problem is that the game hasn't embraced transformation, as you said just now, as something that could be a positive. That by having a bigger pool of players to draw from, we can be a stronger cricketing team or a cricketing nation. That's not something that's been embraced. It's always been as something that is a must-do. So we must pick 3, 4, 6 black players, but we'll bat one of them at number 8, and he can bowl a couple of overs, and that's the end of it. We've ticked that box. It's not about saying, well, how do we make the best use of this cricketer in a team of 11 to strengthen this team? That's not the mentality that comes through. And I think many of the players that are speaking out now are talking about the isolation they feel in the dressing room, in the practice arena, that they're not made to feel a part of the teams that they're playing for. But they stick it out because they love the game. And that is the real the emotive issue that Cricket South Africa needs to deal with. And forget about the fixation on the numbers and the transformation targets. They're important, but it can't just be about the numbers on the field. It's about the quality of life of those cricketers that are participating. Are they being made to feel comfortable? Are they enjoying the game? Are they playing the game with the love and the joy that it should be played with? And that can only help to make them better cricketers.
I don't think it's ever, people think about that, do they? They just feel like these players are brought into the setup and embraced like everyone else. But I saw something recently where there was it's actually, I think it was the segment on Cricket Fanatics, and the gentleman on there, journalists, are saying stories of a black bus and a white bus, literally separating the white place and the color. I'm laughing because it's so ridiculous. But even today's times, that's still happening. It's almost like a New South Africa is a lot of bollocks. Excuse my language, Lawson, but when you hear things like this, and it's just yeah. I mean, I guess I believe now with the amount of, starting with the whole George Floyd incident, obviously, episode that happened there, that the amount of pressure that's been created from the global community, even and obviously then holding again in South Africa, with the amount of attention that's been given, I find it's impossible to go back to the way it was, because of now we've got public statements, you've got back and forth social media, the public is hugely involved now, the cricketing public are hugely involved domestically in South Africa's case and globally. I don't see a way. I maybe I'm being naive here, but I can only see positive change coming about. I mean, would you agree, or?
Yeah, well, look, I would agree, but I think it's going to be a very difficult, painful process. It's going to be a tough process, and I think those cricketers, black cricketers that have stood up and spoken out in the last week or so, have done themselves a great, and the country a great service by doing that, because we can't avoid these conversations any longer. These issues have been pushed under the carpet for far too long, and we've placated ourselves by saying, well, there's a predominantly black board and the governance structure, is representative and the like, but it hasn't affected the change that we want to see. So there's something fundamentally wrong with the system itself, and these conversations need to address that and how to fix that system so that South Africa can begin to embrace all of the cricketers within the country.
Equally, absolutely, yeah.
Equally, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. One thing you actually mentioned to me off camera, Lawson, was about CSA's potential to make Temba Bavuma captain as a way of kind of almost like as a response to say, okay, we're actually as a kind of show the support of black cricketers, which is a very easy thing to do. Obviously, it's actually kind of one of Ravi's questions as well. He says here exactly the same thing. Do you think that one of the outcomes from CSA and the failed BLM campaign may result in Temba being made captain? But Bavuma, obviously, from his statements a few months ago when he was out of the team, I think that would actually do. I think it might make a situation worse, actually, by doing something like that. And I don't think he would also appreciate that, to be the scapegoat / the poster boy, and really just kind of, they can hide behind Bavuma. And I don't think he would respect that. I think he's quite an outspoken gentleman from what I can see.
Yeah, look, I mean, whether it's Temba Bavuma that gets made captain, or Keshav Maharaj, or whoever else it might do, Dean Elgar, whoever's going to take this job is going to be stepping into a very difficult situation of trying to manage these tensions that now clearly have been exposed to exist. So, appointing Temba as captain is not going to solve these problems. It's like in the past, appointing a black president of Cricket South Africa hasn't solved the problems. So one appointment isn't going to change that. The institutional culture has got to change, as to say, a Temba Bavuma should be an automatic consideration for captaincy of this team for various reasons. But if it's now being only being thought of because it's a response to this crisis, and that's exactly the wrong thing to do.
Exactly.
So it shouldn't be as a response to this. It should be because Temba is the right person to captain the Proteas at Test level.
I just feel like now, if they appointed Bavuma as captain, it'd be a case of, okay, we made Temba captain. Okay, you guys can shut up now, relax, and we're going to carry on as we've been carrying on. That's what I think would happen.
Well, that's been the modus operandi of Cricket South Africa for 20 years now.
Yeah.
And I think and what's being said now is that's not that is also not going to be enough to deal with this issue. There needs to be a much more fundamental change that happens within Cricket South Africa at all levels. It's not just about the composition of the national team and who the test captain is. It's got to do with how cricketers are being treated at lower levels of the domestic game in South
Africa. Okay. And just obviously mentioning obviously this all started with Ngidi, who was appointed, given the accolade of the best ODI and best T20 cricketer of the year by the CSA in national awards. I mean, that surely should prove to a lot of people, and the naysayers, that transformation is important, because you're allowing these type of players, these people to come through the system. They're given opportunities. Do you feel like he was given that on merit, or was it almost a balancing act? I know he performed very well in white ball cricket, obviously truncated, but do you feel it? Yeah, just answer that question, Lawson.
No, look, I think the numbers don't lie. He had a phenomenal season in the white ball format of the game. He when he came back from injury, he performed really well. And I think the cricketing public in South Africa would recognise the role that he's played in the side, and certainly see him as someone that we hope is going to stay fit and make a similar contribution at the Test level. So he's certainly one of the bright stars of South African cricket. Who can carry that pace attack forward in the future. So I think it's an accolade that is entirely well deserved. Yes, there will be the naysayers who will say, well, he got it because he's black and the like. But I think those people need to be exposed for the racism that they demonstrate, and to say, well, here's a black cricketer who's deserving of this accolade in the same way as KG Rabada is of the accolades that he gets. Regularly, because of the quality of his performance, and to accept these players as cricketers who happen to be black, but they first and foremost cricketers who want to be treated just like every other cricketer is.
I think that's what's lost, isn't it? I think it's lost in the system a little bit. I think people look at them as black first, cricketer second, as opposed to the other way around. I think that's the really sad indictment of what's happening at the moment. It has happened for a number of years now. Should there be any kind of highlighting the fact that no current player of colour was part of the statement? I obviously know Wayne Parnell, for example, and obviously he's now gone callback. Obviously, he's played for Worcestershire, but there was no one in the current Protea setup.
I think that was probably quite deliberate. That's not to involve the players that are in the current setup. That's all former players. And obviously there are contractual obligations. I don't know the nature of the contracts that the players have to sign with Cricket South Africa. There may be some legal issues around that, but I think it was a strong statement from those players, and I think the players in the Proteas team and in the Proteas squad will have an opportunity to speak out, hopefully in due course when they do get together, and to demonstrate their support for the stance that Lungi has taken, the leadership role that he has taken, and said to his teammates, this is something that we, as the Proteas team that represents the people of South Africa, need to take a stand on. And I think that that's an incredibly inspiring thing for Lungi to have done, and I certainly hope that his teammates rise to the occasion.
Do you feel like there'll be, obviously when they convene, I'm not sure it's going to be, say, Thursday or Friday, do you think there'll be then, in that case, maybe a joint statement put out from the 24 players there post-game, or will it be still silence?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's pointless trying to speculate now. I think there will be some kind of statement, whether it's from the players or from the organizers of this tournament at the weekend. But I would imagine that around the tournament on Saturday, there will be a lot of these issues will be raised. People will have to respond to some of the demands that are being made in terms of prioritizing the issue of Black Lives Matter at this point in time. And, in fact, Cricket South Africa and the organizers of the tournament should have nowhere to hide when it comes to this issue. They have to confront it. They have to demonstrate some kind of commitment in order to take the South African public along with them.
Fantastic, Lawson. So, okay, is there any more points you'd like to raise, Lawson, before we wrap it up?
I think that's enough for today.
Yeah, I was going to touch upon the fact of the quota system, but we've already mentioned it, I think, in depth enough. As you mentioned before, quite clearly, it's a short-term measure. I'm hoping in the future there'll be no need for a quota system. I think that's all we hope for, isn't it? In South African cricket. But
I think the issues that we're facing right now are an ample demonstration of why we need a quota system. It's to force the system to do something because the system is not doing it voluntarily. And I think that's what this has exposed.
Exactly. I mean, they were given 20 odd years to make those changes, and it took basically 22 years. You could argue 25 years from the first test they played after remission 91 to obviously bring this in, these quota systems. But there's enough time was obviously given to CSA over the decades to make those required changes, and there's obviously they had to force the issue in the end. Just quite sad, but I guess that's why it's led us to where we are today. But Lawson, I just want to say really, thanks very much for coming on over these two segments. It's been very enlightening for me both times. It's very educational, these chats. So it's somebody who enjoys, obviously follows South African cricket. It's affected me as well. I think the fact that Lungidi is such a raw and talented and wonderful player, I'm just worried that how it affected him. I mean, he's 24 years old. He's not a fully fledged member of the whole setup. I think to do what he did took incredible bravery. And the last thing I want to see, just from a cricketing fan, is just see someone like him disappear. Get affected mentally because of what's happened, and maybe become a bit disillusioned. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's a very strong-minded character. I've seen a couple of interviews recently with him. I think he'll be absolutely fine, but I think it was quite sad what happened, and I'm just hopeful that things will continue on the trajectory that they were going on a few months ago with him. So yeah, we'll see. But yeah, Lawson, once again, thank you so much for coming on over these two segments. I hope we can get you on in the future. I'm sure there'll be other topic to talk about with regards to South African cricket. Guys, if you enjoyed the content, please do like the video, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And again, thanks very much, Lawson. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Cheers.